Chris-Tia, I want to thank you, my sister. You are our own, but you are God's own. My prayer is that people will see this, but also see the possibilities of business, of work, that it doesn't have to be separate, that as we are integrated with God, so will our businesses be. And so my prayer is that you'll continue to be able to be given more and more land and landscape to do the great work that you're doing. That we will continue to be able to pour into the legacy you've already poured with TGIN Foundation and TGIN as a brand. But beyond that, I think even your heart for prayer and giving people look at people to look down on that equipment and seeing how healing that is, I think is going to transform more lives than you've already touched. And so, my sister, I love you. I thank you. Thank God for
Love
you.
you.
So thankful for this conversation.
Not free, got that big.
2015 was a crazy year for Chris-Tia Donaldson and her hair care company, TGIN.
On March 1st of 2015, we launched in 250 Target stores nationwide.
9 months later, that high came crashing down.
On December 16th, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
But then something unexpected happened. TGIN is now a multi-million-dollar company with products sold in over 10,000 stores nationwide, including Target and Sally Beauty.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. This episode, I am so excited and so grateful to be welcoming an amazing sister, Miss Chris-Tia Donaldson. Now, I'm not gonna lie. I'm one of those people who I have to be full disclosure and act like she's a stranger. She is certainly not. I won't tell too much of her story, but I'll say this much. I've been fortunate to know, admire, and have bear witness to her life, and her to bear witness to my life for many, many years. I think we were introduced in 2003. This is 17 years. And so with this, I'm excited to kind of have her share her story because you probably already know about her. But the big thing I will say about Chris-Tia is that she's true Renaissance woman. And that's been a consistent thing that I've said, from beyond being a giving, a leader who serves, who cares about community and bringing people together. I'll have her speak to that through her just entrepreneur. She's just not an entrepreneur who's strategic and visionary. She's an operator, but cares about our people, and has, through her story and her experience in hair care and some of her challenges, she has brought to life an amazing brand that is helping make hair care that much easier and better for young men and women around the world. But there's more to her story beyond being an author, beyond leading amazing foundation and being a resilient thriver and survivor. I give such honor to God that I have an opportunity to introduce my sister, Chris-Tia Donaldson. What's going on,
Lawrence, what an introduction. Thank you so much. I'm humbled.
Now, Chris-Tia, Chris-Tia, we're not wasting any time. We're gonna jump right into it. You know, you from the What Up though, so I would love you to kind of introduce where you're from, your kind of story, your family story, and then kind of lead us to kind of the journey to TGIN.
Absolutely. So I am from the Midwest. I grew up in Detroit, like in the city of Detroit. So a lot of people always think the suburbs or, what have you. I'm like, no, from the city of Detroit, from 7 Mile. Like if 8 Mile is the movie about Eminem, I'm from 7 Mile. But it was still, Detroit has various parts. There are the good areas and the bad areas. I was fortunate to grow up in one of the nicer parts of the city. Mm-hmm. And I tell people I was blessed to grow up in a home that I consider somewhat functional, if you will. Two parents, my mom, my dad. My mom was extremely like a bright and shining star within the city. At the young age of 27, she was appointed Auditor General, which is a very high position within the city, but she was also the first Black woman CPA in the state of Michigan. So her sense of ambition and drive rubbed off on me from birth. And that's kind of, has been driving me. And then my dad, he was head of internal affairs for the Detroit Police Department. and went on to get his PhD and become a expert witness in custodial police deaths. And he, is the person that I get my attention to detail from. But growing up in the city of Detroit, I tell people I was surrounded by, all types of Black people, round the way Black people, Black folks just making it, as well as, doctors, lawyers, millionaires, and business people. And it was just an amazing city where you had such a diversity of, Blacks across so many areas, if you will, and seeing that, particularly in the realm of government, which my mother, like I said, was a public servant, just inspired me to just feel like I could do anything, that being Black wasn't something that could hold me back. Like being in a Black city growing up, like I said, seeing successful Black people really gave me a lot of confidence, as well as kind of the reassurance that I got from being at home. So where do I go from there?
You go fast forward, because we know that you took that public servant heart, attention to detail, and you put it on a whole nother level, obviously, but just to kind of take us through college, kind of like from there, from home onward.
Awesome. So, I went to Harvard like you, and when I showed up, it was, quite a culture shock, if you will. I wasn't from New York. I was a girl from the Midwest. So I had visited once, but a lot of the people that were there had, been around Ivy League schools, all throughout their high school career. And that wasn't necessarily my experience. And in fact, my high school, some of my teachers kind of discouraged me from applying to Harvard, if you will. But I have, in recent years, I found out that this is pretty common. So thank God for, as they say, God blocked it. And that would be a common theme throughout my life, is that God blocked it, and ended up at Harvard. It was there that I really kind of came into my own, being away from home so far and being around so many different kinds of Black people, as well as other cultures, just exposed me to so much. And gave me a greater appreciation for how big the world was, and that I wanted to do something, not to say bigger than Detroit, but, I had dreams bigger than Texas, if you will. After going to Harvard, I just felt like I could do anything. So went to Harvard for college, majored in economics, then went to Harvard for law school, graduated from there. And when I graduated, started my first law firm job here in Chicago at a law firm where Barack and Michelle Obama met. And back then, I tell people the story was I was in the midst of transitioning my hair from relaxed to natural. And this was around 2003. So pretty much every Black woman, like 9 out of 10 of them, were still perming their hair. And I was that 1 out of 10 that wasn't. But unfortunately, there weren't a lot of products for women like me, especially in mainstream retail. And so I didn't set out to create a movement or change the landscape of Black hair, but I just wanted something better for myself. And I started this law firm job, not wanting to perm my hair once I was kind of natural. And I opted to wear a wig for, to get better assignments, and thinking it would help me to succeed and be more successful and more accomplished and make my white colleagues feel more comfortable. And it backfired. And on that first job, my boss was basically like, I don't have what it takes to be a lawyer at that firm. So I was devastated. So that was one of my first major brushes with failure. Of course, there were little things in high school and college, but this was a major blow. You're about to lose your job on some level. And I left that job, and I was at my lowest of my low. And I forgot to mention that my mom died when I was 17 years old, 60 days before I started my freshman year at Harvard. But this was I guess it was my first major brush with failure, but my second major life crisis where I'm like, God, I really need your help to kind of make it through this. And if we're going to talk about watch God work, it's not that I'm in crisis all the time, but there have been so many signs and miracles where over and over again, he has just worked things out on my behalf. And getting me from that first job to my second job was one of those times.
What was kind of your conversation with God in those early kind of valley moments, I would call it?
Well, I grew up in the Black church, going to Sunday school, pretty much every Sunday. And so that's kind of where I was introduced. But it wasn't like I had the faith, of, the mountain of Gibraltar, if you will. It was like I was just kind of going through the motions. And that was what, I did. And I sang the songs and I showed up. But back then, my faith was like naive in the sense that I felt like I was a good person. And if I, did things the right way, and if I tithed or what have you, and if I came to church, then I was supposed to be immune from tragedy or disappointment or, any failures or whatever. And as you grow as a Christian, you learn that God kind of lets you go through those moments, one, to like lean on him and to understand how powerful your relationship could be, and what that he is going to take care of you if you surrender. But back then I was like a young, immature Christian. And I think it was when my mom died that I don't think at that time I had the same major appreciation that I have for our relationship today that I had back then. But when my mom died, it was devastating. It was unexpected. And he covered me. It's more so on the back end when I look back on my mom died 60 days before I started, my freshman year at Harvard, and then going on to Harvard Law School, and then getting on this treadmill. And it's just like, God really covered me when I was not really even aware of what was going on, or, processing my grief or what have you. Like, I could have had a nervous breakdown or anything, and just lost it all because I didn't really process what had happened, with the loss of my mom. But he kept me. And so I can look back on those moments now, maybe not when I was 23. I just knew I made it through. I knew I was grateful to God, but it wasn't the same type of relationship that I have with him today, which I think is more, how would I put it? I think today it's more intimate. I wouldn't say it was as intimate when I was in my 20s or even my 30s. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was a presence. I feel like I was spiritual. I would go to church. I would, hear the message in the sermon and see what I could take out of it. But I think the trials that I've been through and the things that I've faced over the years are really what have helped me to build a closer and more intimate relationship with him.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think the looking back part is huge, because essentially I think, what you're saying is like, wow, 60 days before I was starting a huge transition in my life, I lost someone so pivotal in my life. But even during that time, you're like, wasn't even sure I was processing it. But looking back, I see that even me not fully processing it, like, I could have looked at all the alternatives, and that God, his presence, or what he was doing, allowed me to still do what I needed to do. What did it look like for you now looking back? Was it the fact that you felt like, were you just like, I just threw myself in my work, I just threw myself in this, and I didn't really process it? What was that? Because I think many people could relate, because even as we're going into now the story of TGIN and how it really picked up, I think people can relate to not necessarily dealing with the stuff of life, right?
Yeah. I think back then and that kind of is what I talk about a lot in terms of even my cancer journey, is that I was not really processing what was going on. I was just, like you said, threw myself into work, and I was out of balance as a human being, if you will. And I've learned, now I'm in a space where I have to listen to my body, and I have to slow down, and mind, body, soul, and spirit have to line up. And back then it was just out of whack. Like, I was just, my whole life, even though it looked like, I was accomplishing so much and on the right path, I wasn't giving enough attention to those moments, the big ones and the small ones, that required me to be, emotionally vulnerable or release, or just kind of like say, it's okay not to be okay. And like I said, God covered me during those moments, but they ultimately caught up with me with a cancer diagnosis. So
This is so you talked about the accomplishments. I want to speak to some of them, and then I want to talk to 36-year-old Chris-Tia.
Okay.
Right. And so, and I knew the Chris-Tia is very humble about hers, but you kind of go, I'm not going to put the firm's name, but Barack Michelle, you leave there, join another firm, and then you're kind of having this kind of concern or this issue, or kind of like the hair thing, which saying like, I'm not finding anything. So could you speak a bit about what was the specific gap? Was it that these products are not, because people think soul glowing, like they think of them blue and white bottles, what I mean? No hate on the classics, but there was kind of like, there's a problem. You started to kind of address that problem, and then it kind of went gangbusters. So kind of talk about the problem specifically and what TGIN was actually meeting, and then some of the success, and I'll fill it in if you keep it too humble.
No, that's fine. So basically the problem was that most of the products on the market were being targeted towards, like I said, 9 out of 10 Black women were straightening their hair. So it would be things like, hair lotions, if you will, filled with like petroleum and lanolin. So it's like, not only were the products like not meant for textured hair in the sense like, different degrees of thicknesses and, better quality ingredients. It just, the performance was not there for someone who wanted to wear their hair texture or a wash and go or something like that. And so I saw that as an opportunity, not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to go out and build an empire, but just saying, okay, there's a gap here. There should be something to fix this, at least for myself. And from there, it was clear I was seeing a few brands that were getting success, that were hitting the same nail on the head. And even then, seeing that, I had to go into a space with God to say, I'm falling behind, God. I don't feel like this is for me. How are all these people, ahead of me? How am I going to make a difference? And again, he cleared the path. You know what I'm saying? It just took time. And timing is everything. So even in this journey, it's like, there have been moments where I felt like we've worked really hard. Is this going to happen? And sometimes, 2 years later, things come back around the wagon and work out for you. So for instance, I'll give you an example. It's like, I remember we submitted products to Ulta after getting in Target, and they told us, we're not interested. This looks, similar to something we already carry, or is very much like something we carry. And then 4 years later, they came back to us and said they wanted to work with us. But the point is, timing is everything, because if we would have started working with them when I had approached them, we weren't ready. We weren't ready from a marketing team standpoint. We weren't ready from an operations team standpoint. We weren't set up for success. And so delay is not denial. They always say that.
This is, I love how you kind of speak to it. I mean, on one sense, right, you talk about how there's the disappointment from a corporate perspective. And I think that's going to resonate with so many people, because there's many people who kind of like, I got all these loans, Harvard Law, Columbia, whatever it is, ain't cheap. I have to go to big law.
Right.
And then you find so many gifted people who, quite frankly, they're doing what they have to do, but realize that's not their space, or this is not for me, or they are exceptional, but they're in a space where that's not affirmed, or the opportunities or the politics eats them up. And then from you, if that had not happened, who knows if you would have looked, or you would have said, you know what, maybe this is not long term. So there's that. Then two, around being prepared, right? So saying, we were in Target. For many people, once you hit the Twin City brand, you're like, we did it. But even then, getting some level of denial and recognizing, looking back, well, we weren't ready. That was grace. Like, that was grace, because from a operations, a back office, from a distribution, from a supply, all those things weren't ready. And so it's like you're seeing God's grace in the denials, in the detours of those things. And I keep saying I was going to live it up. So TGIN blew up, what I would say. So from Target Ulta was more recent as we're
Right.
talking about, but I think it was Target, Sally's, Walgreens, Walmart. So I think it was relatively more recent. I mean, what was kind of like? Give us the timeline, because this thing, I felt like it went like a wave.
It was crazy. So like I tell people 2015 was the best year of my life and worst year of my life. So March 1st of 2015, I was diagnosed with March 1st of 2015, our products launched nationwide in Target. 9 months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I just cracked because I felt like, God, I've worked so hard. So say at this point, I had been putting in, this is 2015, at least 6 years, just kind of like building this brand. The hair care products had not been around for 6 years, but I wrote a book before that and did some other things like around blogging and everything. And I was like, I'm ready to start a family. I'm ready to have kids. And here you are, right when I'm hoping to get to my season of rest, you hit me with this cancer diagnosis. But 2016 was the year that I underwent cancer treatment, had a lumpectomy, froze my eggs, chemotherapy, radiation, and took a leave of absence. I was also working at this time. I had not left my job yet. Took a leave of absence from my job. And I tell people in that year, our sales doubled and our points of distribution quadrupled. So we got into Whole Foods, Walgreens, Sally's, Rite Aid, all happened that year that I was undergoing cancer treatment. And so sometimes God wants to show people or use you to show and exhibit his glory. It's basically like this story wasn't meant for you. It was meant to be a testimony. It's like sometimes you're like, the things that were meant to break you were actually meant to give him the glory. And so that was the timeline. And then from there, recovered, had another bout or recurrence. And then we got into Ulta in 2018. We like kind of inked the deal. In 2019, we launched there. But like along the way, all I can say is that my faith has grown. My trust in him has just increased. And I've just learned to surrender more because, as a type A Harvard person, Lawrence, that like we have a tendency, especially I think when we're younger, to be very much like control freaks. We want to make things happen. And as I've gotten older, I've had to let go and learn to say, I trust that everything's going to be okay. I used to have not anxiety, like not like in a clinical sense, but like I would just worry, I will overanalyze. And now I rest in God, or try to, where it's like if a situation presents itself, I need to work on getting better at asking him first before picking up the phone and asking a sister or a friend. But I'm learning to not do that like back and forth with multiple people about this. I talked about it once, let it go, leave it and give it to God. And so that's kind of where I am. And as I mature, I appreciate that. And I feel the stillness, just like the peace that comes with that type of decision making at this point in my life.
Woo, that it gives me goosebumps, but obviously it weighs on me in a beautiful way when you share all of those things. I think when you talked about how showing God's glory for even for people who are still kind of curious and not really sure about faith, in a time where you quote unquote could do the least, a time when you kind of had to be really still literally to recover and to heal, it grew movement.
Yeah, right. And it's like, it's literally just like a testimony that when people look at the business, you can't look at the business without seeing God. Like, you get what I'm saying? They're one and the same. Like, you can't look at the growth of the company without seeing the God in it, because I have to acknowledge it. It's like, literally, like you said, during a time when I was in my season of rest, the company took off. During the time when I've been on an emotional roller coaster or a health roller coaster, it's like it continues to take off. And that is nothing but the glory of God.
I don't want people to. I know we got right into the nook and cranny of all of her story, but the name of the brand is "Thank God It's Natural."
Yeah,
Like,
he's in the middle of it. He's right there. He's right there.
You all will be seeing this after a beautiful preview and all the sizzle reel and all that good stuff. But goodness, the poetic justice, right? Thank God it's natural. It's natural to rest. Thank God it's natural. Thank God, the literal piece around this. And so what's interesting, I have to ask this question, right? There are a couple of interviews we did where there's kind of like questions behind the brand, so to speak. And for you, beyond what's been said, thank God it's natural. When you captured that statement, what made you say, okay, this is the name? And do you think about that name differently now that you're looking at it? Is it more of a comprehensive meaning now? Or, I'm just curious, because I'm pretty sure people were like, was that a saying? Is that something that somebody said? I would love you to speak to that.
So like I said, when I left my first job, law firm job, I started writing this book. The first book was called Thank God I'm Natural, The Ultimate Guide to Caring for Natural Hair. And a sliver of it was about my story or my hair journey, but the rest of it was primarily focused on helping Black women or women of color with textured hair to care for their curls. And when I was writing my story, it was like 10 pages. And at the end of writing my story, it's like, as a Black woman with a relaxer, it's like, okay, I can't get my hair wet. I got to run in the rain. I can't get in the pools, like all of these limitations, or I have to sit in the beauty salon, all these hours on a Saturday morning and get this, treatment that not only is expensive, but is like, toxic and sometimes leaves me with scalp burns. And when I was finally free of that, it was like, oh my God, I love this life. Thank God, I'm natural. Like, thank God I'm free. So it was like, the Thank God I'm Natural was the book. And then from there, when it was time to name the products, I didn't know what to call them. I was like, oh, I have no clue. I was just, giving different ideals, consideration. And a guy friend of mine was like, well, if the book is called Thank God I'm Natural, just call the products Thank God It's Natural, TGIN. And I was like, okay. And so coming full circle, and the thing about it is you have to realize along the way, the editor of my book told me, why would you put God in the title? Like, and I'm like, why would I not? You know what I'm saying? Like, so it was not to say a risky move, but like, even from a business standpoint, it's kind of like, the founder of Chick-fil-A, like he's very much like, this is who I am from a Christianity or a religious standpoint. It could be a business risk sometimes putting it out there that you're a Christian or that, that there's a spiritual bent to what it is you're doing. And it was risky, but, I didn't care about the outcome. I was just more, concerned about making sure it was true and authentic to my experience. And I'm blessed, like you said, to be here, I guess 7 years later. We launched the brand in 2013. And you just see the God in it. And it's just like, I feel now, Lawrence, like the hair is just a way of getting people into what I'm saying. But once they get here, it's about him. And like you said, giving people an opportunity to see him through me, or see him through my story, or see him through my testimony without pushing it down people's throats. But it's kind of like, the doors of the church are open, if you will.
This is great because I think, one, service and helping has been at the foundation of it, right? So even at the genesis of the story, it's like, I need to help myself, but I know there are other women out there who are going through this. And this was nascent, right? This was kind of before it became cool, quote unquote, right? To solve a problem that, quite frankly, it's not even just like any problem. It's almost like a cultural relic problem. Like, you can't get in the pool, you can't do it, and to find a formulation and then to develop a product line, verticalize, and kind of, that's amazing. but then even beyond that, being able to look at the progress of the brand and see, wow, this has really got in it. I mean, and I think to your point, right? Like that, it's counterintuitive, right? So a lot of people think that, oh no, God, you can't do, but it's just like, no, this tells you. And I think for many people who, and I say this for many people who are still curious or even very nascent in their faith, as many of us have always been, it's like we think that God lives somewhere else. God lives on the Sunday when I open my Bible or this, but like he's called us to work. It was part of his design. So what makes you think that like if he made one the fisherman and someone else that he wouldn't use that? And I think that's so beautiful and I think integrated within what you do. Now I would love to talk a bit more about even just not only personal but corporately, because I think you're in a position where you lead people, your team. How do you so how does your God work, or how does God integrate itself in terms of how you think about leading your team, how you organize your team, how you compensate, just like how is God in the DNA of the company beyond the story?
Well, I think with the team, on every team, you're going to have A players, B players, and C players really shouldn't be there, but A players and B players. But the point is, you've got to pray for your team because A players are amazing, but sometimes they come with egos. And so you've got to sometimes pray for those egos. You've got to pray for how to work with those people. You've got to pray for how to coach those people because, you could be super talented, but sometimes you may not have the soft skills. Like you're super great at execution and getting things done and planning and strategy, but like you may be lacking in the soft skills or how to communicate with people. And so you got to pray to God about how you approach these individuals, the language you use, if you will. With some of the B players, they sometimes are falling behind the A players. And so you've got to pray for, their progress. You've got to pray that God instills in you, the time, the strength, and the wisdom to coach them up to be, better at what it is they do. Because to be honest, Lawrence, it can be hard, like, being a type A, very high standards, if you will. Sometimes you can you've got to find a way to bring out the best in people. You get what I'm saying? And so you've got to ask God to help you for that. You've got to ask God to help you for your team. Not everyone's going to be happy at every job. You got to pray for your workplace. You've got to pray that the Spirit covers your workplace because, along the way, everyone may work for you, but they may not be for you. And so you've got to, again, pray that God blocks that. And so it having God around and just being a presence and having that intimate relationship, you have to be in constant, communication about the business and just asking him that if he gave you this assignment, that he would give you everything you needed to be successful at it.
That's interesting. We had a conversation with my sister Leslie, and she talked about how she leads the careers of some of the top music acts in the world, and she talks about praying over her artists, and how important that is and how powerful prayer is. But I want to point out is how much you said, like, ask for God's help in. So clearly, in your own capacity, you recognize, man, I can't handle, or I can't cover all of this. And so I think the humility, I think people will really see in the fact that you pray over every element of your business. Now, I think one of the other beautiful things, because I think when many sisters see you, I think they see themselves. That a beautiful woman who has a vision for creating something in the world that helps people. But at the same time, one of the things that you talked about, whether it be in kind of at the age of 36, or you talk about how kind of things were out of whack, things were out of balance. What does rhythm look like for you with God, with that with the experiences that you've had? Because I know that that'll help many brothers and sisters think through, okay, God is not telling me to put this away, but how do I reorder my life accordingly to make sure that I put the first things first?
Well, this year I started observing the Sabbath, and we've talked about that. And so, taking a day off, you would think I would be getting less done, and be more frantic. But I actually feel like that day to just kind of commune with God and just kind of put my body and my mind in a place of peace and just, intentionally slow down has been beyond helpful to me. So in terms of like kind of just getting it together and talking to the 36-year-old me, it's like I said, mind, body, soul, and spirit. It's like you have to give your mind the opportunity to rest, like really rest, whether that's through meditation, whether that's through observing the Sabbath. But just we're in a time where we're always on, whether it's social media, whether it's our jobs, whether it's, text messages, what have you, that rest is critical. The body, again, listening to your body, eating well, but also just resting. Like, we are living these, like I said, always on lives, and the mind, if it's always going, it's going to create confusion in your body, or you're going to not hear from the things in your body, but that confusion ultimately leads to disease. And then like the soul, I feel that's my purpose, or whatever your purpose is in life, and figuring out what that is. But the spirit, it's all connected, like going to church, listening, like you said, beyond just reading your Bible, just beyond Sunday, just making that relationship with God a priority and not just one day a week, at least for me. And when I think you do that, the other things start to calm down. So the mind starts to slow, the body is less confused. It's just like it all falls in perfect order. So that for me is how I'm trying to order my life at this time.
That is I think that is going to help so many people, especially as you said, in this time. And I think because of, this is a timeless conversation, but I think we're in a period of time, pandemic related, that many people have been forced to slow down, so to speak, or don't feel much. And I think they'll find inspiration in, even when my abilities or what I can quote unquote do may be limited, that is, God is unlimited.
God is unlimited.
That my capacity, or, me stopping is care. It's not careless, it's care. I would love to, because even as we kind of get through the tail end of this, I would love to hear for you, when do you feel closest to God? For you, because I know some people I like to walk, I like outside. It's for me, it's music. For me, it's like I like to sleep, or when I eat. Like, what is it for you where you're like, okay, God's up in here?
I think I think when I first wake up in the morning and I'm laying in the bed, and because like I said, I've been on a health roller coaster, so there have been times where I've woken up, and every time I wake up in the morning, I just feel like I'm getting stronger and stronger and more energy, and it's just like, I remember a time when, you know what I'm saying? And just to feel that, and just to know that, I can get up, I can walk, like my legs are moving. Like I just take nothing for granted. So I think first thing in the morning, and also when I'm outdoors. But Lawrence, it's interesting. I think also as we get older, like say, I'm in my early 40s, if you will. But like as we get older, like Tony, I don't know what his last name is, the CEO of Zappos, just died.
Oh,
I don't know how to pronounce his last.
Yeah. I do know.
It's Hsieh. I don't know how to
Tony
pronounce
Sue,
his last
Tony
name.
Sue, yeah.
But it's just like hearing stories like that, hearing stories like Kobe Bryant. You're like, you know what I'm saying? It's just like life is so precious. And just seeing young people or middle-aged people die, who, you know what I'm saying, who have their entire life to live, waking up in the morning, I'm just grateful. Just so grateful.
I think this is a good Transition point, because I think before even we discussed it, you talked about gratitude and um, how that's just an overwhelming feeling. And I think to your point, when you look at this and just, that's sad news for us to hear about the passing. I think it points to that you can have everything in this world, everything that every distributor and online, ad you'll receive will tell you you need to have to be happy, to be whole. But you consistently see where those who may seemingly have it, or those who come and speak and say that they have it, there's something more that they realize about life that they have to be grateful for. And I think that people will truly see that in your story and in your life. And I think one of the reasons why I was so excited to do this, not just because that I've been fortunate by God's grace to know you, but ultimately that I always say transform people, right? You're transformed by the grace of God. And because you're in an environment where you're around people and you're leading an organization, God's spirit is in everything that you touch. And so, one, I want people to know, if they did not know, if it wasn't clear by the product itself, thank God it's natural, is part of that kingdom work, right?
Thank
And
you.
that way beyond our time, I want this to continue and people to see that in the same way, but even differently, because we have a different story than a Chick-fil-A, that they see that and they say, oh, that's us and that's God's.
I love
But two, I would love to tee people up to know what you have going on, because you have the TGIN Foundation. You are releasing product lines. I'll be seeing them. I'll be looking. I had to join in the back. You know what I'm saying? I
I
keep trying to
love
keep the
it.
curls. Keep
I
the
love
curls.
it.
I put it on today.
I love it.
But what do you have going on? How could people kind of get behind? What do people have to look forward to that's coming from your hands and God's hands?
Well, like you said, the TGIN Foundation is definitely something that is very near and dear to my heart. Like I said, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015 at the young age of 36. And what I didn't see back then was young women, particularly young women of color, who were dealing with this disease. And so I felt so alone. But turns out, you know, Black women in their 30s and even in their 20s are being faced with breast cancer, but no one was really talking about it. So I really want to continue to highlight that and use our platform to highlight that, as well as we recently announced a partnership with Lyft to make sure that uninsured and underinsured women had rides to their doctor's appointments for breast health or cancer treatment, because that can be a significant barrier to survivorship, if you will. So again, kind of my rally around cancer awareness, and just, I think, eventually getting into helping people understand the power of prayer when it comes to healing. I think that's definitely going to be something on the horizon for me, based on my own experience. So, yes.
Oh man, on the ladder. We're gonna put the battery on that. We're gonna put the I would love, it's almost like in the family of God, when we kind of are, whether it's in the church or whether you're in someone's living room or whether you're now on Google Meet or Zoom. I don't want one of them to be mad because we all got friends in either, right? So Google Meet, Zoom, Citrix, whatever. Somebody is curious, or they're kind of nascent. They're where you were in your 20s, or they're not even it. They're looking at it. People talking about this God stuff. What would be your advice for somebody who's curious? They're working hard. They're trying to figure out things out, but they're just curious about this God thing. What advice would you give them as someone who's in this curiosity, I'm not sure phase, that you think that will help them in their journey?
That is a tough question. I think just start talking to people. Just start talking to people who walk by faith, that know Him, and talk to God. Like, He is accessible to you. You don't have to go to church. You don't have to, you know what I'm saying? Like, it would be nice to read your Bible, but like, you've got to, that communication is always open to you, no matter where you are in your walk. And so I would say, talk to people of faith, and just see, tell them, where you are, but also talk to God. He is open to you. You don't have to have a reservation. He's always there. And the door is always open.
Mm.
What would your advice be? I need to hear what you would tell a young 20 something.
I think you ended it quite perfect, but I think it was actually perfect. What you spoke about. I think I wanna honor what you've shared, which is kind of you could always speak to God no matter where you're at. And the brief story for me, the conversation was almost like Santa Claus when I was a kid. But that conversation continued all the way through, to my late 20s, right? And it didn't really mature enough until that point, because I just was kind of going off of what I would call a obedience borrowed faith of my parents and not my own until that point. And so I think what you said is huge because I've never really met anyone who refused prayer. No one's ever refused prayer.
I like that.
And I think because conversation gives life to relationship, gives life to everything, we know that language. I think that's a great on ramp for people who are unsure, are suspicious. But I do think that you've given people such a great on ramp to explore. And with that, you've given us much more in this conversation, Chris-Tia. I want to thank you, my sister. You are our own, but you are God's own. My prayer is that people will see this, but also see the possibility. And with that, you've given us much more in this conversation, Chris-Tia. I want to thank you, my sister. You are our own, but you are God's own. My prayer is that people will see this, but also see the possibilities of business, of work, that it doesn't have to be separate, that as we are integrated with God, so will our businesses be. And so my prayer is that you'll continue to be able to be given more and more land and landscape to do the great work that you're doing. That we will continue to be able to pour into the legacy you've already poured with TGIN Foundation and TGIN as a brand. But beyond that, I think even your heart for prayer and giving people people to look down on that equipment and seeing how healing that is, I think is going to transform more lives than you've already touched. And so, my sister, I love you. I thank you. Thank God for
Love
you.
you.
So thankful for this conversation. Possibilities of business, of work, that it doesn't have to be separate, that as we are integrated with God, so will our businesses be. And so my prayer is that you'll continue to be able to be given more and more land and landscape to do the great work that you're doing. That we will continue to be able to pour into the legacy you've already poured with TGIN Foundation and TGIN as a brand. But beyond that, I think even your heart for prayer and giving people people to look down on that equipment and seeing how healing that is, I think is going to transform more lives than you've already touched. And so, my sister, I love you. I thank you. Thank God for
Love
you.
you.
So thankful for this conversation.